Dual Cultivation, WN, Chapter 87, Bedtime Story. Lu Longji continued to stand there with a pondering expression after many moments of silence. Although she didn't want to accept someone who wasn't even a disciple of the sect to become the patriarch, she really had no other choice, as his prowess was seemingly too profound for a small sect such as the Profound Blossom sect. Additionally, if what he said was true, that he was willing to protect the sect and even bestow them a few cultivation techniques, then the sect's status within the cultivation world may even soar to the skies, allowing them to hover beside the truly big names in this world. The current position the Profound Blossom sect held within the cultivation world wasn't anything worthy, even looking like ants in the eyes of the giants such as the Divine Sword sect, but with this mysterious old monster's appearance, perhaps they may become something bigger than just ants. Lu Longji suddenly closed her eyes, sighing in a defeated tone. She then began to lower her body until she was kneeling on the floor. Lu Longji greets the patriarch, she said loudly. Seeing this, Su Yang nodded with a smile. Very well, then I shall remain in these clothes for a bit longer. And as agreed, I will not touch the sect, nor will I change anything, so you can continue every day as usual. Unless the sect is in peril, I will not intervene with your business, he continued. What about him? Lu Longji pointed at the lifeless Li Cheng and asked. I will leave his body and the announcement of a new patriarch to you. Even if you have to lie to everyone within the sect, I do not want too much of a commotion, as I hate loud noises, he replied, essentially leaving all responsibilities of Li Cheng's death to her. Feeling bitter, Lu Longji nodded. I understand. Good, then I shall leave for the time being. If you need something from me, you can contact me using this jade slip. Su Yang threw at her a jade slip meant purely for communication before turning to approach the window again, and Lu Longji watched him leave without saying a word despite her many questions for him. At this moment, all she wanted was for him to quickly leave so she could finally organize her chaotic mind, not to mention that she has to think of an excuse for Li Cheng's death and the sudden emergence of a new patriarch without causing too much commotion within the sect. Why is this happening? Lu Longji mumbled in a dazed voice. Su Yang returned to his living quarters after leaving the Yin-Yang pavilion, where Cho Aiwi patiently waited for his return. You're still awake? Although cultivators at your level doesn't require much sleep, you look tired. Get some sleep or else it'll affect your beautiful skin, said Su Yang to Cho Aiwi the moment he returned, pretending that he wasn't aware of her sneaky surveillance. Cho Aiwi silently nodded. She then uncrossed her legs from her lotus position and laid on his bed, treating it as though it was her own bed. Su Yang could only smile at her actions and decided to leave her alone. However, just as he turned around, a low and sweet voice resounded. Tell me a story like you used to, mumbled Cho Aiwi, her gaze staring at his back with a lonesome feeling. Halting his step, Su Yang spoke with a smile on his face. Which story would you prefer tonight, my spoiled little princess? It was a phrase he'd regularly use whenever she'd ask him for a bedtime story. The story of the mortal girl who traversed the universe in search for her missing father. It became a favorite of mine ever since I first heard it, she replied. I know, said Su Yang. Out of the hundreds of stories I've told you, it's the only story you've ever wanted me to repeat. Su Yang then sat on the bed beside her, and he began narrating the story in a tender voice, as Cho Aiwi slowly closed her eyes to listen. There was a young girl named. She loved her caring father, who'd worked until he'd fall from exhaustion to feed her, very dearly. But one day, he suddenly disappeared like a ghost. Devastated by her father's disappearance, she went on a journey in search for him. On her journey, she had slain countless demons and beasts, even becoming a famous name throughout the world. But alas, despite her worldwide fame and profound power, she was still unable to find her father even after many years. However, she did not give up and continued to search. One day, she broke the boundaries of a human being and soared higher than any cultivator in the world. Eventually, she reached a point where she was able to traverse the stars and travel the starry sky. Countless years have passed since she started her journey in search for her father, but the chances of her father, who was a mere mortal when he disappeared, still being alive at this point was non-existent. However, despite already aware of such facts many years ago, the stubborn daughter continued to look forward to the day her father appears before her again every day. Ultimately, she became one of the strongest existence in the universe with the power to influence even fate. She then traveled to a mythical place where mindless souls awaited for reincarnation, with some souls there having existed for thousands of years. Cho Aiwi was long asleep by the time Su Yang reached this point, her sleeping face as beautiful as a sleeping fairy and as peaceful as a baby who was deeply asleep. Su Yang stopped telling the story and reached for her face that was stained with tears with his hands, wiping the trail of tears from her silky face. He stood from the bed and left the room shortly after, closing the door behind him. Su Yang released a deep sigh once he was alone, his gaze seemingly filled with countless profound thoughts as he recalled the story of the young girl trying to find her father. And for the remainder of the gloomy night, Su Yang sat in the living room in silence, seemingly in deep thoughts.